It began with the sound of glass breaking, though there was no glass for miles. The forest floor had always been soft pine and leaf rot, yet tonight each step crunched as though dusted with crushed crystal. Tiny flecks caught the dying light, glimmers like frozen droplets suspended in time, catching a moon that had not yet risen. They stopped, breath held, listening. The noise came again. Tink. A fragile pop, the sound of a hairline fracture spreading across something unimaginably vast. The air changed, heavy and expectant. The trees, tall and ancient, seemed to lean inward, their branches arching toward the hooded figure as though eager to bear witness. Kneeling, they brushed away the brittle carpet of leaves. Beneath was no soil, no tangled root system, only a surface smooth and clear as ice, yet strangely warm. It reflected the sky, but the reflection was wrong. No moon, no stars, only a depthless black. Shapes drifted within it, moving in slow, deliberate arcs, their outlines bending unnaturally as though viewed through warped glass. One came closer. A pale hand, impossibly long-fingered, pressed its palm against the surface. The glass beneath their feet trembled as frost-like cracks bloomed outward from its touch. A sound followed, not speech, not song, but a pattern of knocks, 3 slow, 1 quick, 3 slow again. The traveler staggered back, heartbeat loud in the stillness. The forest had gone utterly silent. No rustling leaves, no chirring insects. Turning to leave, they froze. The path was gone. In its place stretched a narrow corridor of that same glassy surface, fractured in places, vanishing into shadow. Beneath the pane, the shapes were moving faster now, watching, circling. The traveler hesitated at the mouth of the corridor, the glass stretching ahead like a frozen river under the trees. The surface carried a faint shimmer, pulsing almost in rhythm with their heartbeat. Beneath it, shapes stirred, some drifting lazily, others darting closer before slipping away, as if toying with the idea of breaching. A faint pressure settled on the air. Not a wind, but a weight, pressing from all sides. It carried the taste of copper and something sweet, like rotting fruit. The traveler's breath fogged the surface as they looked down. The reflection wasn't theirs anymore. In the black pane they saw another hooded figure walking ahead, though they themselves had not moved. The figure in the reflection stopped. Slowly it turned its head upward, revealing a face both familiar and not. Pale skin stretched thin over sharp bones, eyes like dull mirrors. It raised one hand and placed it on the underside of the glass, palm matching the traveler's footstep exactly. The surface spidered with fresh cracks, the sound echoing as if inside their skull. They stepped forward despite every instinct screaming to flee. The forest closed in overhead, branches tangling to form a ceiling of shadow. The glass beneath their boots gave faintly, not from weakness, but from something pushing back. Somewhere far ahead, a faint yellow glow flickered, a lantern swaying gently in unseen hands. And then came the sound again. 3 slow knocks, 1 quick, 3 slow. This time it was not from below. It came from somewhere ahead, deep within the corridor, answering the call from beneath their feet. The traveler moved toward the flicker, each step ringing faintly as if the glass were hollow. The shapes beneath followed, their movements sharper now, their eyes, dozens of them, opening in the dark below. The air grew colder, but the glass radiated heat, seeping through the soles of their boots until it felt almost feverish. The glow ahead bobbed slowly, swaying side to side. Between the dark trunks it seemed impossibly far one moment, then startlingly near the next. It lit no path, casting no real light, just a pale aura that left the rest of the forest steeped in shadow. They glanced down again and saw the other hooded figure, pacing them in the reflection. It held no lantern, yet its silhouette rippled, warping like an image on water. At the edge of its form, faint cracks in the glass spread outward, spilling thin streams of black liquid that ran beneath the traveler's feet. The stuff hissed where it met the air, releasing that same copper-sweet scent. The knocks came again. 3 slow, 1 quick, 3 slow. This time they answered, rising not only from ahead and below, but from behind as well. The traveler turned. The corridor they'd crossed was no longer empty. Figures stood on the glass, far in the distance, their outlines wavering like heat mirages. All of them faced forward, toward the light. The traveler's pulse quickened. There was no choice but to keep moving. The lantern swayed once more, then went still, hovering as if waiting for them to arrive. The traveler slowed as they neared the lantern. Its glow wasn't firelight at all, but a dense, swirling haze caught in a cage of black iron. The closer they came, the more the air hummed, low and metallic, a vibration that settled into their teeth. They reached out, and the moment their fingers brushed the cold metal frame, the haze flared bright. The forest around them warped. Trees bent away, their trunks elongating into jagged spires. The glass corridor shuddered beneath their feet. Below, the shapes had stopped moving entirely. Dozens of pale faces stared up, mouths wide in silent screams. A shadow passed over the haze, dimming it. The traveler's reflection on the glass was gone, replaced by the hooded figure from before, now standing above the surface beside them, though it had never climbed out. Its form was solid, taller than they remembered, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Without a word, it pointed deeper into the corridor. The glass there was broken, shards suspended in mid-air as though gravity had forgotten them. Through the opening was not forest, but a churning void, shapes moving in impossible directions. The traveler looked back toward the distant figures on the glass. They were closer now, their faces indistinct, but every one of them carried the same flickering glow inside their chests. The knocks came again, loud enough to rattle bone. 3 slow, 1 quick, 3 slow. This time the sound came from inside the traveler's own skull. The traveler staggered back from the lantern, but the hum in their teeth didn't fade. It burrowed deeper, threading through muscle, marrow, thought. The corridor's glass began to split, not with the sharp sound of shattering, but with a long, slow groan, like the earth itself bending. Beneath the fractures, the faces pressed harder against the surface, skin stretching, eyes bulging, mouths still locked in silent screams. Black liquid welled from their eyes, spilling into the cracks, running upward instead of down. The hooded figure stepped closer, its gait wrong, too smooth, as though joints bent in the wrong directions. It stopped inches away, tilting its head until its hood brushed the traveler's cheek. No breath, no warmth, only the scent of copper and rot. Its hand, pale and cold, rose and touched the traveler's chest. The glow from the lantern flared again, but now it wasn't in the cage. It was inside them. A sharp pressure bloomed in their ribcage, and for a moment they saw what the hooded thing saw. An endless plain of glass, every inch of it lined with figures like themselves, each carrying that same glow, each staring upward at a night with no stars. When the vision broke, they were standing inside the reflection, the world above now hazy and unreachable. The forest was upside down here, roots hanging like claws. The glass ceiling shimmered faintly above, the hooded figure watching from the other side. Somewhere in the black distance, the knocks came one final time, 3 slow, 1 quick, 3 slow. Then the glass went dark. At first, the traveler thought the forest beneath the glass was motionless, but then something stirred among the inverted roots. a shifting mass of shapes resolved into people, or the imitation of people, thin and warped, their limbs too long, their steps staggered as if some invisible puppeteer pulled them forward by fraying strings. The air around them seemed denser, shimmering like heat above asphalt, making their movements stutter between frames. One of them paused, its head tilted upward directly toward the traveler's feet on the other side of the barrier. What passed for its face was stretched beyond human proportion, mouth hanging open wider than a jaw should allow, skin sagging as though it were melting from the bone. The eyes, or where eyes had been, were now black sockets, each threaded with delicate, razor-thin shards of glass that pulsed faintly like veins lit from within. The traveler staggered backward, but the ground here was no longer the familiar crunch of leaves and soil. It had softened into something sponge-like, almost wet, every step sinking a fraction deeper than expected. Beneath that strange give, a slow ripple spread outward in concentric circles, warping the reflections all around. Above, the hooded figure crouched, one skeletal hand resting against the glass. At the touch, the walkers below froze mid-step, their heads snapping in unison to face the same direction. Then the knocking began again. Not in the air this time, but inside the traveler's skull. 3 slow, 1 quick, the same pulse as before, but now overlapped with another pattern, faster, more frantic, as if something else was answering. With each rhythm, a faint tremor passed through the glass, and the black-socketed faces twitched in response. They began to move again, but not toward the traveler, toward the horizon. The landscape below wasn't infinite. It bent ever so slightly, as though the world itself were a bowl and the edges curved toward a single, distant point of light. The walkers shuffled in that direction, their glass-threaded sockets glinting faintly with every step. The traveler didn't know why their own legs followed, only that the knocking was louder now, syncing almost perfectly with their heartbeat, each step pulling them closer to whatever waited in that far-off glow. At first, the traveler thought the forest beneath the glass was motionless, but then something stirred among the inverted roots. A shifting mass of shapes resolved into people, or the imitation of people, thin and warped, their limbs too long, their steps staggered as if some invisible puppeteer pulled them forward by fraying strings. The air around them seemed denser, shimmering like heat above asphalt, making their movements stutter between frames. One of them paused, its head tilted upward directly toward the traveler's feet on the other side of the barrier. What passed for its face was stretched beyond human proportion, mouth hanging open wider than a jaw should allow, skin sagging as though it were melting from the bone. The eyes, or where eyes had been, were now black sockets, each threaded with delicate, razor-thin shards of glass that pulsed faintly like veins lit from within. The traveler staggered backward, but the ground here was no longer the familiar crunch of leaves and soil. It had softened into something sponge-like, almost wet, every step sinking a fraction deeper than expected. Beneath that strange give, a slow ripple spread outward in concentric circles, warping the reflections all around. Above, the hooded figure crouched, one skeletal hand resting against the glass. At the touch, the walkers below froze mid-step, their heads snapping in unison to face the same direction. Then the knocking began again. Not in the air this time, but inside the traveler's skull. 3 slow, 1 quick, the same pulse as before, but now overlapped with another pattern, faster, more frantic, as if something else was answering. With each rhythm, a faint tremor passed through the glass, and the black-socketed faces twitched in response. They began to move again, but not toward the traveler, toward the horizon. The landscape below wasn't infinite. It bent ever so slightly, as though the world itself were a bowl and the edges curved toward a single, distant point of light. The walkers shuffled in that direction, their glass-threaded sockets glinting faintly with every step. The traveler didn't know why their own legs followed, only that the knocking was louder now, syncing almost perfectly with their heartbeat, each step pulling them closer to whatever waited in that far-off glow. The point of light on the horizon grew, not with distance closed, but as though the darkness around it was retreating. The travelers, both the unwilling one above and the warped walkers below, seemed to move without any change in the landscape, the trees bending overhead in a way that made the forest feel like a throat closing. The glow wasn't warm. It was a color that defied memory, pale like bone in moonlight, but with a pulse beneath it, as if it were alive. Every time the traveler blinked, the light seemed closer until it filled their vision in flashes, almost too bright to stare at directly. The knocking was a constant now, a metronome under the skin, vibrating teeth and bone. The walkers slowed as they approached a structure beneath the glass. It rose like a church spire, but it was hollow, built from tangled roots petrified into a lattice of black and silver. The hollow center throbbed with that strange bone-colored light, and within it, shapes moved. Fingers, hands, maybe whole arms, reaching and withdrawing in time with the knock. Above, the hooded figure stepped onto the glass, their weight leaving no sound, no crack. They followed alongside the traveler's movements, perfectly synchronized until they came to a stop over the hollow light. They knelt, lantern dangling over the glass like bait over deep water. The light inside the spire seemed to see the lantern. It swelled upward, pressing against the glass from below, and for a moment the traveler swore they could hear whispers, thousands of them, crowding into the space behind their ears. Words that were not for them, but about them. Something brushed the traveler's leg. One of the walkers had turned its face toward them, glass-threaded sockets flaring with reflected light. And though its mouth did not move, a voice slid into the traveler's mind, cold and smooth. 3 slow, 1 quick. Then, you belong. The glass between worlds pulsed, not in sight, but in sensation, each beat pressing against the traveler's chest, drawing breath from their lungs. The hooded figure raised the lantern higher, and the pale light from below strained upward like a tide, lapping at the barrier. The walkers gathered in a loose circle around the spire, their necks craning back at unnatural angles to look toward the traveler. Their glass-threaded sockets pulsed in the same rhythm as the knocking, which had slowed again, almost gentle, as if coaxing rather than commanding. The traveler tried to step back, but the ground held them. The sponge-like surface had thickened, clinging to their boots with each attempted retreat. It smelled faintly metallic, like rust, and the more they struggled, the warmer it became. The whispers grew clearer, threading into full sentences. They came from inside the traveler, curling through their ribs and spine like smoke in an enclosed room. They spoke of the others who had come before, who had walked on this side of the glass, and who now wore new shapes in the forest below. The hooded figure began to knock against the glass with the bottom of the lantern. 3 slow, 1 quick. The sound was deafening here, rattling the traveler's teeth. The watchers responded by stepping forward in unison, arms outstretched toward the spire. A crack spread through the barrier under the traveler's feet. Not wide enough to break through, but enough to feel the breath of the hollow light on their skin. It was cold, impossibly cold, yet beneath it lay the suggestion of movement, like something alive pressed just under the surface. The traveler realized, with a sudden and painful clarity, that the knocking had always been meant to open this place, and now it almost had. The crack beneath the traveler widened, spider-webbing in all directions. Through the widening slits, the hollow light boiled upward, spilling across the glass in ribbons of pale fire. It wasn't hot. It was the cold of deep stone chambers and winter graves, a cold that numbed skin but sharpened every thought to a painful edge. The walkers' heads snapped upward in unison. Their mouths hung open wider than bone should allow, and a soundless howl spilled from them, visible as a distortion in the air. The hooded figure raised the lantern higher still, and with a final deliberate strike of its base against the glass, the knocking's rhythm changed, faster, urgent, almost gleeful. The whispers became a single voice, a low monotone that filled every inch of the traveler's mind. Step through. The glass floor buckled beneath their boots. Instinct made them try to flee, but the sponge-like surface gripped tighter than ever, rising around their ankles as if the ground itself had decided they should stay. Through the cracks, skeletal fingers made of root and shadow began to reach upward. The hooded figure leaned close, its face still hidden in shadow, and the traveler saw, for the first time, its eyes. They were mirrors, and in them the traveler's reflection didn't match. It stood below, among the walkers, its eyes already threaded with glass. The barrier gave way with a shriek of splintering crystal. The traveler fell forward into the cold light, their screams swallowed before it left their throat. The fall seemed endless. Cold wind howled past, yet the trees above did not recede. They simply vanished, swallowed by a blackness that pressed inward like the inside of a coffin. The traveler's body felt weightless and heavy all at once, their limbs slow to obey even the smallest command. Then, with no impact, they were standing. The ground beneath was a tangled mesh of black roots slick with frost, and overhead hung the underside of the glass barrier, now impossibly high, its surface rippling like water seen from beneath. The walkers surrounded them. Up close, their shapes were worse than imagined. Their skin was mottled with veins of glass, their fingers bent wrong, and their mouths twitched like broken marionettes. They leaned in, smelling of earth long closed off from the sun. From between them, the hooded figure stepped forward. Lantern in hand, it raised the light until it filled the traveler's vision. Within the pale glow, shadows twisted into familiar shapes, their own memories, distorted and wrong. Faces they knew, places they'd been, all warped into something that did not belong in the waking world. The knocking returned, 3 slow, 1 quick, this time inside their bones. The figure's free hand extended, long fingers curling toward the traveler's chest. When they touched, it felt like frost cracking open flesh, and the world tilted. Their vision split. Part of them stood here in the root-laced chamber, looking up at the hooded figure. The other part was above, on the glass, moving without choice. Another walker, eyes threaded with glass, following the rhythm that would call the next soul down. The hooded figure lowered the lantern. Its light dimmed until only the faintest pulse remained, keeping time with the traveler's new heartbeat. Somewhere above, far away in another world, someone began to hear the knock. 3 slow, 1 quick, and below in the cold, the traveler waited.